Well, let's talk about Syria. Syria. Oh, beloved Syria. It's a country I know so well and cherish. And what's just gone on in Syria? They've had an election. An election? A country that pre-war was 26 million and now, I suppose, it probably has a population of, I don't know, about 14, 15 million left. They had an election, a national election. How many people voted? 6,000. Not 60,000. When I heard first, I thought it was 60,000. 6,000. And most of those that voted were, the candidates and their families in the many. I mean, literally, it was not an open vote. There was not an opportunity to vote for Syrians at large. The 11 members in the Supreme Council manipulated and arranged this. 140 member parliament, 119 seats filled. There are no elections at all in the Kurdish or Druze-controlled areas. No elections at all in the Kurdish or Druze-controlled areas. This was not a public vote. Those on the restricted electoral roll were the only voters. Wow. I mean, no pretense at democracy. Under Bashar al-Assad or under Sisi in Egypt or wherever there is a kind of pretend. But no, there was no pretend here. This was the establishment of an assembly to serve al-Shara, formerly known as Jalani, the dictator of Syria. The United States is backing him. The US has an interest in a stable Syria. Indeed, in Congress, they had a statement, an official statement from the US Congress that said, the US has an interest in a stable Syria free from the malign influence of Russia and Iran. That's the words. Instability in Syria might open the door for Russia and Iran. So they back al-Shara. Iran is on the back foot, but Russia is not. Russia is in the ascendancy. So it's all a kind of fiction. The US is gearing up to inherit Syria, but it has competition. I mean, al-Shara is behaving himself better. He cannot afford another massacre, like the massacre of the Alawites or the massacre of the Druze that he conducted and encouraged. He cannot afford that. Meanwhile, Israel is working with the Arab states to oppose Turkish hegemony. They say, or does Israel accept Turkish hegemony in the north? It's a curious, which way do you read it thing. You understand, don't you, that Israel occupies a massive chunk of southern Syria and Turkey has hegemonic control of a massive chunk of northern Syria. And then you have the other areas that al-Shara controls, the rest. And of course you have America. The US has been pushing the Kurds towards an agreement with Damascus. The Kurds in the northeast of Syria are US clients. they've been pushed towards an agreement with Damascus. And Trump keeps praising Erdogan, the Turkish leader. In that regard, it's all part of the web. But does America really understand what is going on? I'm not at all sure it does. The UK, meanwhile, is just a kind of spanner in the works. It's opposing the repatriation. Britain is the strongest vote in opposition of the repatriation of its citizens. You know, you remember the famous Begum case, the woman, the child really, that went as an ISIS bride and is a British citizen and cannot come home, and her children died. But she's just the tip of the iceberg. There are a number of British citizens in Syria, and Britain has removed their citizenship. Evil little worm Britain is. Britain opposes the repatriation. They leave its dirty washing. Britain leaves its dirty washing for other people to clean up. It's interesting. And the Russians, despite what US Congress is saying, Russians are really in there. Al-Shara visited Moscow just the other day. He was the first non-Assad to visit Moscow in 55 years. In other words, all the Syrian presidents visiting Moscow have been, Bashar al-Assad or Hafiz al-Assad or Hafiz's brother, my erstwhile friend Rifat al-Assad. Putin praised the election results. How much he understands of the election. It's debatable. I don't think he does. He's not particularly well briefed. But President Putin praised the election results, and when al-Shara visited Moscow, they discussed the future of the air base and the naval base, and confirmed their continued presence, the Russian air base and the naval base. I mean, they're not necessarily the most important. Now, Russia also has a naval base in Libya, of course, as you know, so it has a couple of bases in the Mediterranean. And the Libyan base is very important because it serves Africa, where Russia has a lot of action. But anyway, meanwhile, Israel isn't really thinking. Israel has occupied vast proportions of southern Syria, bulldozed down forests and so on, just to create, for security reasons, horrible, really, environmental behavior. Occupied vast proportions of southern Syria, but the Israel government is not really that focused on the issue. Israel is overwhelmed, the public is overwhelmed with the Gaza issue. And interestingly, I mean, there's payback in here. There's a kind of, you see, Israel has stopped Turkish troops from coming in as part of the Gaza Protection Force. It's refused to have them, which is interesting. But the reasoning behind this is that Turkey is Muslim Brotherhood government, really, and therefore, well, it is a Muslim Brotherhood government, not really. It is. Turkey has a Muslim Brotherhood government. It just renamed itself under Erdogan, and so the situation is that Israel has refused to have Turkey in as part of the Gaza Protection Force. So, because it sees Turkey as giving Hamas a chance, so maybe payback, Turkey is an important ally of Israel, so payback is to let Turkey carve up Syria a bit more and not object. There are other reasons. I mean, the Israelis describe themselves as having a blood bond with the Druze. The Druze did a lot of fighting on behalf of Israel, and so that's their excuse. They're protecting the Druze. I'm not sure the Druze want protecting. They'd rather have their freedom. But they're now falling under Israeli hegemony in southern Syria, whether they like it or they don't. And Israel claims it has a strong responsibility to care for the Druze in Syria. So you will be cared for. Of course, there were the massacres in Sweden by al-Shara, and it's difficult for Israel to stand by and watch massacres of Druze. But I don't think al-Shara will do that again. But nonetheless, it's difficult for Israel to stand by and not intervene. What are the Gulf states doing? They're not giving money to Syria, but they're promising to give money, but they're not. I suppose their enmity to Iran is greater than their enmity to the jihadists in Syria, so they are backing the jihadists, but so cautiously, so carefully. So Moscow is strong in Syria now. Putin used to condemn Jilani as a terrorist for years when he opposed Bashar al-Assad. Jilani was the nom de guerre of al-Shara, who is the president, the dictator of Syria. Turkey is in there from the north. Israel is in there from the south. And Moscow certainly doesn't want to lose influence on Syria. It's providing, petrol and other things to Syria, everything it needs. And here's something somebody told me, a friend of mine. It said, none of these countries, the countries with fingers in the pie, and we're talking Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the United States of America, Turkey, and Israel, and Qatar. None of these countries has offered a sufficiently good deal to the new Syrian government to make the new Syrian government align themselves with them. The half-hearted stance of the United States and the Arab states and the European Union's limited involvement keeps Syria fragmented and limits the extent to which any group is dominant. Wow. So what's going on? It is fragmented. The minorities are getting more organized than they were 6 months ago. And give it another 2 or 3 months, people will be still more organized, more entrenched. Druze area will be on its own. The Kurdish area will be on its own. Yes, the neighboring countries, the other countries, nobody's supporting Syria financially. Very difficult. Teachers and so on are not getting paid. People are not getting paid. So it's difficult. On the other hand, let's be fair, there is more freedom. The religious militants are not so much in evidence in the grip of power. The government is more pragmatic. Hotels are getting booked up again. The Syrian border is welcoming. If you have money, you are a prince, but Syria is gripped with poverty. But then it was under the last days of Bashar. And a lot of people, like teachers, are very, very poor. 90% of Syrians are very, very poor. There's nothing coming in from the rich neighbors of the Gulf states or America, or nobody's helping them. There are a lot of complaints, no electricity, no water. And of course, I was speaking to a Christian friend in 20 years, he said you won't find a Christian left in Syria. But al-Shara is trying to be more pragmatic. He even went to visit the Patriarch of Antioch, which was a big deal to the Christians, and he had his photograph taken with him. So he's trying to be more inclusive, particularly of the Christians. And there's this talk about decentralization rather than federalization. Well, same thing, isn't it, really? Decentralization by default, despite the fact that everybody's fearful about decentralization. That's what's happening. Syria is getting torn apart by the different players, particularly Israel and Turkey, America over the Kurds, and so on. People are coming in from outside, coming home, some. Nothing like the numbers that have left, of course, and are leaving. But meanwhile, you have the Idlibization of Syria. Now, Idlib is where most of the militants were driven during the civil war, up in the north next to Turkey. And the people are coming down from there, taking positions. They're giving appointments to their own, which is fine, but they don't know how to do anything. If you put a guy from Idlib in charge of the port or the airport, he doesn't know. He has no experience at all. From left field he comes in. And so nothing works. They need, you're bringing in people with no knowledge at all because they're your patsies. Well, fine. But we need the return of professionals from outside Syria. We don't need this. Infrastructure is getting destroyed by incompetence. People like port workers, they're putting their own people in, so they're loyal but incompetent. You can't do that. Well, you can do that, but nothing functions. Meanwhile, black market is up and all of that, and Moscow is getting lots of prizes. It's been promised joint industrial zones, all sorts of cherries, joint industrial zones in Tartus and in Latakia. Russia is doing very well in Syria. They talk about trying to bring the Kurds back in. General Petraeus said that the SDF, the Syrian, the Kurdish forces, would merge one way or another in the national forces. Well, it's not going to happen. Dream on, General Petraeus. You're talking out of your hat. But the Kurds do want a tenable situation whereby Turkey does not threaten the Kurdish area in northeast Syria. And the US is trying to work towards inheriting Syria as a whole. And the Israelis don't really want to weaken Syria. If it forces Syria into the extremist camp. And Turkey needs Syria. So you have exclusion by al-Shara of the minorities. They say he's going to bring in minorities into the 70 people he will appoint to the assembly. Personally, well, but that's not really inclusion, that's a kind of exclusion. All of the powerful people now are male Islamists around al-Shara, and al-Shara rules. He rules. He's the true dictator of Syria. Is there a better hope for a better tomorrow for Syria? Yes, I think so. Somebody will step forward and bankroll Syria and become the new backer of al-Shara. Will it be Qatar? Will it be the United States? Will it be Turkey? Will Turkey inherit everything? I think it'll be Turkey. New Turkish Empire. And Syria will be stabilized. Turkish hegemony, apart from the bit that's controlled, the southern 25% controlled by Israel. But things will stabilize. Life will be kinder. The Kurds in the northeast, America will continue to have it always has a soft spot for the Kurds, so they'll be okay. Is it a better tomorrow for Syria? Yes, actually. It'll be freedom from fear. not an inclusive government, not even remotely so. But there'll be freedom from fear under the new dictator, and Syria will march on to a better tomorrow. Just don't let me hear you pretend that it's democracy, because it certainly, most certainly, is not. Thank you. God bless you all.